Hi, I'm Kayleigh and I'm an arts tutor with South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture. Today we are going to be doing some acrylic painting. We've got 6 weeks of it and today we are starting with a little bird. This is going to be our reference image for this week and you'll be able to get access to this so that you can paint along with me and you'll see all the different techniques I'll use to get lovely feathers, a nice background, and we'll pull together a full picture by the end of this tutorial. Your final result should look a little something like this. So I'll tell you how to set up first off. We're going to start by using some acrylic paper. So I'm using this one here. There's loads of different kinds you can get, or you can use a canvas or any sort of thick paper should be able to hold the acrylics anyway. I have taped it onto my drawing board here. And I've got a little bit of tape just going all the way around the edges. That'll hold the paper tight so that it'll hold more paint on the page, but also you'll end up with this lovely little border around the edge at the end as well. The other things you'll need are a mixing palette. So your mixing palette, I've got these tear-off palettes, which means you can just dispose of them at the end, but if you don't have any, you can use just a plate, any old plate you've got around, or you can use some baking paper as well. Baking paper is quite good because you can mix on it and throw it out right at the end. We've got all these paints as well. There's 6 paints that you'll need to paint this bird, and there'll be a list of those up on screen now. We're also going to be looking at using some different brushes. So I've got a selection here. These are round brushes, so they are just, if you look at them like that, they're round. We've got a small one and a medium one, and if you want a large one for your background as well, you can use that too. Nothing fancy. If that's all you've got is one paintbrush, you'll still be able to paint the bird using just one paintbrush. I've also got some more coarse brushes here, so it's really coarse at top rather than this kind of smooth ones we've got here, and these are both flat brushes. Really good for background and getting some feather textures in as well. If you've got a palette knife, it's good for mixing, but I've actually done the tutorial with no palette knife in case you don't have anything like that around the house. And you'll need a pencil and rubber as well. And that's it. Really straightforward, really simple. Even if you're a complete beginner, I promise you'll be able to paint this little bird by the end. We're going to start by looking at our colour wheel. So you might know what a colour wheel is already. You can find them on the internet. Just Google colour wheel. They're all exactly the same, just in different formats. We've got our 3 main colours, which are primary colours, are red, yellow and blue. And then we've got secondary colours, which are when you mix your 2 primary colours together. So that would be your violet, your orange or your green, whenever you mix these. In between those, you've also got tertiary colours as well. They're kind of the same. If you mix a primary and a secondary colour, you get your tertiary colour, which yellow and green would make a yellow-green. Green and blue, blue-green, etc, etc. So it's always good to just kind of know these as much as you can off by heart. It helps your colour mixing a lot easier as you go along. If you're adding black to anything, you've got to be quite careful not to go too dark, but when you're adding black, it makes it a shade. So a shade of red would be a slightly darker red. If you're adding white to something, it's a tint, so you would end up with a tint of the colour. So it would be a light red would be a tint of a red. These, as I say, these all look the same on Google, whatever you kind of choose, but it's always good to know how they work. So we're going to practice a little bit of colour mixing just now, just before we start. If you do some colour mixing, I'm going to leave this up here. If you do any colour mixing at all before you start any of your pictures, sometimes you just come up with new colours and it's good to know. When you're mixing, you want to choose one colour and choose the other and mix it separately in your palette. Try and avoid dunking certain colours into other colours, or it'll just end up with a really, really muddy palette. The best way to mix your colour is to start with your light colour first. So if I was mixing my yellow and red, take a chunk of my yellow, I'll dab that there, wash your brush in between, give it a good dry. Some colours are stronger than others. And then add a little bit of the dark into your light and start with just a tiny bit to start off with. You'll see how orange that's gone already. So you can practice this with all different colours. I've got my 6 colours which we're starting our little picture with. And this is all you're kind of going to need. to be able to mix any of these colours. So just to practice, that's me mixed my first colour. You can do little swatches on the paper just to practice what they are. They'll always turn out slightly different. So remember to mix enough if you are using one of your colours. Once you've got your main one, so we've basically made a secondary colour. So this is our yellow and our red to make our orange. You can try making tertiary colour. So if you're making a tertiary colour, we can try and get either this red orange or yellow orange by adding a little bit more. I'm going to add a little bit more red and just get this a bit darker. The most important thing with colour mixing is just having a clean brush in between. And then if we're to do another little swatch beside, you'll see that that's a little bit darker. I quite like that actually, it's really warm looking. And warm and cool colours are quite important as well. So your warm colours are anything on this side of the wheel, and your cool colours are on this side, more blues and greens. We want lots of contrast in warms and cools in our picture when we're actually going to paint it, so we'll go over that when we're doing the bird. Yeah, so if you were to do a little, say our own colour wheel here, like that, then this is the sort of way it would go. We go our yellow to orange and onto our just plain red right at the end. This is a cadmium red, which is quite pinky and really, really vibrant. Again, you can practice mixing all your different colours. I don't want to go through every single one of them. I'm sure you can manage to do that yourself. But it's a really nice relaxing way to sort of start your painting and practice getting different colours going on. So I'm going to try just doing a little bit of a tint and a shade of our blue here. So if we add our white, just to separate a little bit on the palette here, wash your brush in between, and then add a little bit of blue. Then you've got this lovely tint of a nice light blue. Adding white to things makes things quite pastel-y as well. So you can have really nice pastel-y colours if you're just adding lots of white. If you add a little bit more blue to that, you'll see that it's still got a nice pastel feel to it, but it is a bit darker, somewhere in the middle. Go. So if you're doing any colour mixing, I'd highly recommend just grabbing a random sheet of paper and try some really obscure colours together as well and see what you end up with. We're going to start off by drawing our bird. So we'll just use a pencil. Any pencil will do. I believe in HB pencil you can draw anything in. It's kind of halfway between dark and light, which means it's easy to rub out and you'll be able to see it underneath your paint as well. Obviously using acrylic paints, things do have great coverage, so you won't be able to see any pencil lines after you've painted over the top. So you don't have to be as careful as you would say you were using watercolour. When I'm drawing anything, I like to use shapes to kind of work out how things are brought together. I believe anything can be split into shapes, even a bird. So our bird, we have got an oval shape here, and we've got a circle oval shape for the head. We've then got a sort of triangle shape for the wings and a kind of triangle shape for the tail there as well. It's a really, really simple way to draw. Obviously, if you find it drawn with lots of little lines better, then that's no problem. So I'm going to go on and just start with a circle for the head. Really, really simple. Draw it in as many times as you like until you get the sort of shape you're looking for. The oval for the body comes out a little bit further here and a little bit further here, so it's going to be a lot bigger and it sort of overlaps. I'm using an A4 sheet of paper, but if you wanted to draw a little bit bigger, then just make sure you fill your page. Composition can be anything. As this is a demo, I'm just going to do it smack bang in the middle of the page, but you can think about whether you want it sitting slightly off centre, or if you've got more in your background as well, you might want to add different bits in. I'm going to add in our triangle for our wing here, and it is almost flush down the back here. So we want to take a line coming right down. Lots of light scratchy marks are the best way to pull this together. You'll notice I'm quite a messy drawer. I do leave a lot of lines in, and then when it comes to it, I rub them all out right at the end. We've got our tail, which comes slightly under our wing here, and just out the back, this sort of shape. And then our feet come onto the branch. They're actually, you can use your pencil to look at angles, and this angle, it's almost 45 degrees, a wee bit less that one, for both of your legs. That one's more like that, and this one comes right out. It's not what you'd expect from a bird. You kind of expect them to be straight down the way. And then you can curl your toes round like this. Or claws. I'm not quite sure what birds have, toes or claws. One of them. You can draw on your branch as well if you like. Well, I need something to stand on. It'd look a bit funny if he was just floating rather than flying. I'm just marking roughly where that is. As I said before, the paint's going to cover over it anyway. And now I'm going to rub out any lines I don't need. So these sort of come out. And we'll just tidy it up a little bit so that I know where I'm going with my paint. Birds are a great thing to start off with if you've never really used acrylics before, because they're quite straightforward. But if you are used to using acrylics, they're also really good for getting all your textures with your feathers and things if you're a wee bit more advanced. So I'm just now marking in where I see different parts of colour. So we've got our yellow bit on either side. And then our wing is split into a few different colours as well. I'm not bothered about getting it too perfect right now because our paint will do that for us. But just an idea. And then a little beak comes straight out the front. It's a wee bit triangular shaped as well. And then the white area about there. Wee wing, a wee eye even. Rub that out. Try again. I'm drawing really fast, so if you do need to pause the video, please do, and take your time to get your bird just the way you want it. I draw quite fast and loose, so don't feel the pressure to keep up with doing everything as fast as this. And everyone makes mistakes, so if you've made a few mistakes you've had to rub out, then don't feel bad about it. There we go. So that's me now got my pencil drawing of my bird. So with acrylics, you can choose to paint your background or your main subject first. It doesn't really matter because with acrylic paints, you can layer up your paint on top of one another. You can, if your background seeps into your main subject or vice versa, you can then just paint over the top, which is one of the joys of acrylics. However, today I'm going to start with doing my background first, mainly because although this is a photograph, it's got lovely soft colours in the background, which I think I might just replicate in my painting. With a painting, you can choose whatever your background is. It's totally up to you because you're the artist. But I think this works really, really well with this purple contrasting with the yellow. If you're ever choosing colours for your background or your foreground, you want a lovely contrast between them. And your contrast you can see in the colour wheel here. So anything that's opposite works really well. They're also sometimes called a complementary colour because they work so well together. It seems a bit funny, contrast and complementary. So we've got yellow and purple and yellow and purple, so that's why it works really, really well. I'm going to start by mixing purple using the colours that we set out at the start. So we've got this cadmium red, we've got an ultramarine blue, and we've got a white here. This is quite pastel-y, so it comes under using a tint. So I'm going to mix a little bit of my red, my blue and my white. I'm going to start with the red because it's the lightest of the colours. I'll take a little bit over here. Well, the lightest of the two colours of red and blue. Obviously white is lightest, but that's tinting it, so it's a little bit different. Just make sure your brush is nice and dry in between. Adding a little bit of blue in, and let's just see where we get to. Purple's a funny one. I do find that your purple looks slightly different every time. But when you're doing a background, you want to make sure you're mixing enough of your colour, because trying to remix is a bit of a nightmare. I'm going to add a wee bit more blue in because it's still looking a bit reddy. I think we need another little bit of blue. I'm just going to use a different brush here. Put that aside. And now it's looking a bit more purpley. I quite like that colour. We can add a little bit of white in. Try and get as much of the excess paint off your brush as possible. It just saves wasting paint, because we want to make sure we've got lots of it as well. And then I'm going to take a big scoop of white and add that in. And that's a lovely purple. So it's not too dissimilar from what we've got here. Colour mixing is trial and error, so don't be too hard on yourself if it takes you a little while to get there. Right now your purple probably looks totally different to mine. Mine's is quite pinky. If you add more blue, it would end up more purple probably than that, but I quite like the pink. I'm going to use this brush to do my background. It is quite a coarse brush, as we went over at the start, and it just gives you a really nice texture for the background. So I'm going to dunk it in the water. You can add a fair amount of water to acrylics and it makes it go a little bit further, but you don't want to add too much that it starts to break the paint down. So yeah, let's just, if you use a big enough brush, it saves you a lot of time. Let's just get most of this paint right on. And with the texture of this brush, you can actually see the brush strokes come through, and that's a nice thing. If you need more water, just dunk it in. You're better to go too watery for your first layer, and then go a little bit thicker on your next layers. You're also better to slightly go into your bird than have a big white outline all the way around it. You don't want it sort of glowing on the page. So if in doubt, just cover over little bits of your bird if you have to. You've got a big brush as well, it's hard not to sometimes. So I know my picture up here's got a bit of green in it, but I'm going to keep mine quite pinky for the moment. Or purpley, pinky purple. And I'm just going to use lots of different brush strokes with this brush just to get really nice texture coming through. You don't want it to be too perfect. You're not painting the wall of your house where you want to not really see many brush strokes or anything. You want to give your picture lots of character and depth. So by being quite, I would call this probably like messy with your brush, you'll get lots of character to it. Again, you could see I'm starting to get a bit of a glow around where I've avoided going too close to my bird. Try not to do that. Go over your bird if you have to. There we go. And I think I'll stop about there. Now let your background dry and then we'll go on to painting our bird. The next stage we're going to go to is a bit of colour blocking for our bird. So colour blocking is where you get your inner child out and you paint by numbers and you look at all your different blocks of colour that you've got in your picture and then just mark them in. So it's not about getting these little individual feathers in. It's not about having the perfect white highlights on our wings here. It's more about just getting the main colours in here. Nice and simple. You'll feel a bit strange doing it though, because I always feel like I want to be adding more detail than I am. I'm going to start with my yellow. With acrylics, watercolours are different. You do have to start from your light and work dark. With your acrylics, it's not quite as fussy as that. You can work dark and get to light as well. Your white should be one of the last things you put on for some of your highlights anyway. but I'm going to start with my yellow because we might need a couple of little layers of the yellow going on. I've just gone straight into the paint, no water on my brush, use it nice and thick, and just pop this on liberally. Again, if you go out the lines a wee bit, it's alright. You can paint right over the top. And then we've got this yellow bit down the side. I actually love seeing some of my background come through because you can actually see, this is a good example of it. Got little bits of texture just about here, which is actually like little feathers coming through without even meaning to do it. This is where you need to sort of get rid of the perfectionism when you're painting things in. And then there's a kind of yellow, it's actually a wee bit yellowy green up here. We'll just mark it in yellow just now, and we can use kind of green details. Right, I think that's all the yellow in. I'm going to leave the branch for now. That'll probably be one of the later things we'll do. Just focus on our bird just now. The other main colour in this bird is the blue. We're going to go straight into the ultramarine blue. I don't think we need to add anything. It is quite dark actually when you see it close. It's pretty much a match. So we can thank the bird for that. That's nice. And then again, just colour blocking it in. Get those main colours on there. I feel like this is always a good bit of painting where you can relax into it and you don't have to be too precise. It's like mindfulness. Starting to come together. And onto the wing. So although the wing's got lots of white highlights on it, bar this little white area here, I'm actually going to just paint it all in blue and then go over with my white highlights afterwards. And this little bit in the middle here, it's a kind of, I don't think it's completely black and I don't think it's completely brown. It's a little bit of a mix in the middle. So you'll notice I don't have any black on my palette here. And we might use a little bit of black for the eye later on, but the way to get the darkest colour possible out of just your main sort of primary colours as such is to mix your ultramarine blue and your burnt umber together, and you get a really kind of dark, kind of almost grey colour. So your blue's your lightest colour this time. Take that in your palette and wash your brush again. Just do a little bit of mixing here and add in a bit more brown. And you can see how dark that gets. It's quite incredible actually. Using black in a picture makes everything really, really stark. So if you can avoid using black, sometimes it's worth it. I got that first time in a mix, that never happens. So if you do need to mix a wee bit more in until you get to that stage, please just carry on. I'm just delighted I got it first time. And then we'll just mark this in as well. So it's just a softer black. It's got a little bit more blue shining through in it, and a little bit less bold. You can even mark in your eye as well with that one. I need a smaller brush. Brushes are there to help you, so if you find that a smaller brush throughout would have been a bit easier, then just go for whatever is most comfortable for you. I think I'll make the beak black as well, it's quite dark. There we go. And some of this is a bit darker, so we will come back to use this colour again. But I think the most important thing just now is just to get in all the main colours. You can put in a bit of white too. Obviously there's a white of the page shining through here, which is always good to use, but you might want to add in, especially kind of down here, there is this sort of white section and this bit here as well. It's like a little line going right across. And if you've got any wee bits in here, maybe you've gone over it with the blue or something like that, you can always add those in. Last up, we've got our little legs, which are, they've got blues, reds, whites, there's pretty much every colour on this. So I think what I'll do is do a lighter purple, or a different purple from the background, a more blue purple than this one. So again, you're going to mix your red, you wash the brush in between, bit of blue, and mix that together. So you can already see that this is a darker purple. I'm not going to add any white to this one, so it's not a tint of your purple, it's just solid blue and red mixed together. And we'll just mark in where the legs are. So depending on what kind of brush you've got, I've got a good point on this one, so it's actually okay for doing the feet, but you might need a smaller brush. This one, I can just see my pencil marks and no more. If you do need to draw it in again, don't be scared to get your pencil out and actually draw it. You don't have to just stick to paint now that you've got the paint out. There we go. If you want to add in your branch now, you can. You can also wait right to the end and see where your colours end up with this. I think I'm going to mark mine in just so I can kind of see where it is, and I'm going to do it in green at the moment because it's mainly a sort of green colour. We've got greens, yellows and a little bit of brown in there. But just roughly putting in where it is. The brush is a little bit wet. You want as solid a colour as possible. There we go. In between as well. And it sort of goes up here. You can make this branch whatever you like. If you wanted to be adding different leaves and flowers, or like maybe a wee blossom branch or something might be quite nice, but use your imagination. I'm just going to go quite standard, and I'll bring it right off the edge here as well. And that's us got our colour blocking in. So our next stage is going to be details, but we'll let that dry just now. So we're going to go on and do the detail of our bird. For this, I've got 3 different brushes that I'm probably going to use mostly. We've got the one that I've just used throughout, which I feels good for larger bits of detail, a smaller, finer one for tinier detail, and then this one, which is quite a coarse brush, which actually the bristles match really well to some of the feathery textures that are going on with our bird here. So always use your brushes to your advantage. If you've got a brush that looks like it would have similar textures to whatever your subject matter is, then try and find that. A fan brush can also be quite a good option too. So let's start off. We're going to work from the top down, and then once that's dry we can go back to the top again and add in any other details. So with the head, there's a couple of different shades going on. We've got our ultramarine blue already in as a sort of colour block to start off with. There's a darker blue coming through here, and a lighter blue right on the top of the head, which is a highlight. So whenever you're looking at any subject matter, you want to be able to work out where the light bits are, the dark bits are, and replicate that in your image. It's what makes it look more 3D, and it's what makes it look more realistic as well. So I'm going to start by mixing up a couple of different blues, just so that I've got them sitting there and I can dip into a couple of different versions. It's good to have them already prepared. So 2 little dollops of blue there, and we'll do a lighter one and a darker one. So we'll grab this, and this is a tint of the blue. Just mix that up. Try and wipe some excess off the brush. And then we'll do a darker blue as well. So rather than using black to get our shade, I'm going to use this brown like we did before here, but not quite as much in, so that it still stays really blue, but just a little bit darker. When you're adding shade to anything, it turns really quickly, so you need to try and not add too much to start off with. Better to start adding a little bit and then add more if you need to. It's harder to claw it back. You might have been in a situation where you keep mixing and it just never gets any lighter. So always start with a little bit. So that's me now got 3 blues here. I've got my ultramarine, I've got my darker version and my lighter version. And it means I can just go straight into the head here and add lots of little feathery bits. So I'm going to start with the darker one. And right in at the beak and round about the eye, it is a little bit darker. Right, so I've put that on and I actually think it needs a wee bit more blue in the mix. So if that does happen to you as well, don't try and just make it work. Just go in and remix. And you can always go over the top. Got a bit too much paint in my brush there. That's much better. You can see that now. So it's okay, it was actually quite dark in there anyway, so it worked out alright. And I'm going to add a wee bit more. And I'm just doing little tiny brush strokes in the direction of the feathers. And this adds a bit of texture. You don't have to do every individual feather, but just building up layers of that on top of one another works really well. Got a little bit underneath the beak as well. I'm going to add a wee bit darker again. I didn't clean my brush in between that, don't copy me. A wee bit darker in here. And then just build up that colour round about here as well. And the more you add on top, the more it will all mix together unless it's dry. Once it's dry, you're able to add more layers on top. So you're starting to see it come together a wee bit more full now. It looks like it's got more full feathers. I'm going to get a different brush, our little tiny one here, and I'm going to use our lighter blue. And I'm going to use that just at the top here, with this highlight going right the way across. Now if you pull it out into your background a little bit, it stops that really harsh line or any potential white glows that might be going round about it. So this looks really light right now, but we're going to go over the top and change that. So now actually it's a bit lighter in here as well. I'm going to wash my brush and then I'm going to go straight into just the ultramarine blue. And we're just going to layer that up on top. And you see that just takes it back a little notch because it's still wet. You're sort of blending it in on top of one another. So unlike watercolour where you just blend things on the page where you've got lots of water to blend it together, you're almost layering up different colours of paint to blend it with your acrylics. And the more different shades you've got and tones, tints, you will get that lovely blend going on. Feel free to go back in with any, like, if you feel like you need more lighter bits coming back in again, then you can. I'm going to bring the lighter ones right the way down the side here. And down the front. And although it's lots of tiny details, try and still have a wee bit of fun with it, rather than getting too caught up in it must be perfect. You can even add in some of your own little bits. The good thing about nature is that all birds are different, so if you do end up with some little unusual bits that aren't actually in the photograph, my brush is too wet there, so just make sure your brush is nice and dry in between. Sometimes it gets caught up on the handle area. There we go, it's better. Yeah, all birds are different, so if you do have little bits that are different and not in the photograph, that's alright. Makes them unique. So hopefully you can see some of these textures coming through. Obviously in your painting you'll be able to see all the little tiny bits. So here we've got little white feathers coming over the blue, and blue going over the white as well. It is easier to put blue over the white, so you might want to do some of those marks with your blue coming up rather than the white going down. If you need some darker bits as well, just layering up. I'm going to add a little bit on the beak here, just while we're up at this area, but we'll come back and we'll do the beak and the eye last, because I always feel that finishes off your painting really nicely. Kind of rewards you for all your hard work on the rest of the painting once you see the eye go in with the big highlight. Next up I'm going to go straight into my white, so I'll have a nice dry brush and use the paint quite thickly so that you can get good coverage. Just bring that down. If you need to overlap some bits that you've already done, by all means. Now for this white bit, you can actually see there's little bluey bits coming through as well. So you can mix a really light blue, just add more white to the one you've already got, and you can add in some little tiny brush strokes. Now dry brushing is a good technique for this as well, and it just means you see some of the texture of the paper, the paint come through, and all you do is you have a really dry brush and a little bit of paint on your brush, dry it off again, and just go over the top and go back into my white again and just layer that up. So it's looking a lot more, it's got a lot more depth in it now that there's little white and little blue bits coming through. There we go. So that's our head almost done. Now it's time for the body. I'm going to go into my yellow, and within this you can see some sort of yellowy green sort of colours shining through, and the really light yellow as well. So we're going to do a tint of the yellow, same as we did with the blue, and a green kind of version of the yellow as well. So grab yellow up here and here. Wash the brush. We'll do our tint. It's a nice kind of, this is lemon yellow I'm using, and it still stays reasonably vibrant even when you add the white. It doesn't go too pastel-y. Obviously the more white you add, the more it will. And when we're going to do the greeny one, we're going to use the tiniest little bit of green, because it'll go a long way. Again, if you didn't get this right first time, please just keep trying, it will happen. Right, so we've got our 3 yellows here. We're just going to do the same as we did with the head and just layer these up. Try and have quite a dry brush as well. Oh, the brush is still a wee bit wet. Oh, I've gone straight into my white picks. And you don't need to do every single feather on here. Some of it is just quite plain yellow. So it depends how far you want to take it, how realistic you want your bird to look. I quite like a painterly look, where it does look like a painted bird, it doesn't look like a photograph. So I keep my brush strokes quite loose. If you need to add in some pure white as well, this bit's quite pure white, you can do. And if you feel like you've gone too white at any bit, I think I'm probably okay just now, but you can just go straight in with your yellow over the top, layer it up, and it sort of pulls it back a little bit. It's all about the layering. So we've got these little feathers coming across at this side. I'm going to leave those just now, and we'll do those once we've got all our little bits in here done. Just keep layering up. If you've got a wee bit darker bit, you can use your darker one slightly down here. I've actually got this bit of background coming underneath the yellow here, and I know it's not on the bird, but I love it, and I think I might keep it in. You can do lots of layers over the top and it will disappear, but it actually adds a little bit of shade without me meaning to. Kind of happy accident going on. Right, a wee bit more white up here. And then over this side, we've actually got quite a lot of the kind of greeny one. So let's get that in over here. Might actually need a wee bit more green in there. Get darker and darker if you like. And that's about right. So as I say, it is trial and error. Eventually you get the colour you're looking for. See, it's part of the fun. I don't tend to wash my brush completely in between every single brush stroke and go in between different colours, mainly because it gives you a better blend, and it stops it being too watery at any point as well. If you are washing your brush in between, please make sure it's dry, or it can end up running, especially if you've got it up on an easel as well. And just lots and lots of layers. And this side, it's really quite white. Putting a wee bit of white on there. So this is like mixing on the page. You can mix on the page or you can mix on your palette. And this helps the process a little bit. And just keep layering up. I'm going to carry on doing this, but take your time getting as many layers in as you want, and stop when you think it's done, not just when I've stopped. Oh, he's looking quite fluffy now, quite like that. Now, with these little feathers coming across here, and some of these down here as well, I'm going to use this brush for it. And what I'm going to do is use a dry brush, go straight into my paint, and then use the brush to bring it on like this. And it adds, the more brushes you use, the better texture you get as well. So you can do sort of stippling motion as well, if you want some different colours coming through. Because this is like lots of little tiny, tiny feathers. And then you can go back to getting some of these nice brush strokes in as well. Now it's important not to go too far with it. You don't want to have too many of them, or it'll just look a wee bit cartoony and too fluffy. Just a little bit definitely helps. I'm just going to add in a couple more little bits down here, and then we're going to move on to the wing. I'm just going to dry my brush really well. I'm going to need to mix a wee bit more of that. That's dried out. Acrylics do dry really, really fast. I'm just going to add in a couple of little bits. Again, if it's not exactly the same as the picture, don't get too married to the picture. And while we've got that colour before it dries out again, let's have a little look where that colour is elsewhere. So we've got a little bit here and a little bit under here as well. I'm just going to mark that in. A little bit here. And then you've already got your blues mixed, so you can use these to get the lovely lines coming down. And just try and be as steady as you can with your hand. I'm kind of going in just with some stripes just now. And then I'm going to layer up lots of different colours on top. And just keep referring back to your picture as well. What can you see? What does it need to look like? Do you need more white? Do you need more blue? This big white bit coming right the way down. This is really light, slightly out of focus in the photograph. So obviously, as this is a painting, we don't really want that out of focus, so you can just add in a wee bit stronger. And the lovely smooth lines versus the sort of feathery lines over here work really well and complement each other as well. So you can add in some darker lines too. There's some darkness in here. Oh, and it's just building up that colour. Add a wee bit more white just in on top of some of these. There's a little bubble of water there. If that happens, just grab a little bit of paper towel and you can dab it off, or you can just let it dry as well. There you go. Okay, I think the wing is nearly done. If you get any other wee extra bits, you might notice as you go along. I'm going to add in a wee bit more yellow, just coming over this side. There we go. This white bit underneath, last little bits, little feathers. There's one white bit right under there. And then it's time for the feet. So our feet are basically made up of this large white area and this shadow. There's hardly any mid-tone in between that. It's just really, really light or really, really dark. Over here, this is quite reddy pinky, and it's got a highlight actually on either side the way the light's shining. So you just want to be looking as close as you can to your picture and working out. Don't feel like you have to draw something in your head that's feet. you're definitely just drawing what you're seeing instead. So go right in with the small details. Oh, I've taken that wee bit further over there. We can go over the top. And then this highlight that comes right the way down as well. So this is like the fiddly detail. Some people love it, other people not as keen. And the same over this side as well. And then I'm going to take my darker purple. It's dried out, need to remix it. A wee tip with your palette is if you spray some water underneath your palette, it keeps it wetter for longer. I didn't think of that though. I'm okay with remixing, it's not like we need exactly the same colour, so that's okay. And if you need it a little bit darker, you can always add a little bit brown in as well, and that will darken it down. Or some more blue. And try out your colour before you put it on. You can always try it on the side of your page to check you're happy with it. Depends how precise you want to be with your colours. It's always good to test them. There we go. I think that'll do for the detail with these. I'm not a huge detail painter. I just like to show a hint of the feet, and I quite like it like that. A bit looser. Just one more wee highlight in there. I always say that and then I add little bits. I keep going back. I'm like, oh, I'll just add that in. There we go. I went right over the top. This is, so you know when to stop. This is one of the biggest things you should learn in art, is knowing when to stop. Right, let's go back up to our eye, and we're going to get our eye and our beak in, and then we'll just add a wee bit more detail into this branch, and that'll be us. We're almost there. Almost there. So with the eye, we want, it's actually quite browny. So I don't think I'm going to actually get out any black. I think we'll just stick to using the brown and the blue mixed together. Just using over at this side of my palette. See, remix one we've already got. And you're going to use your little tiny brush, thick paint, and get that in as dark as you can. You need a wee bit more brown, go for it. Nice. So just layering up, you're almost mixing on the page a little bit to get that darkness. And there's a little highlight going right the way around the outside, which is a little bit lighter, and this really bright highlight here, which is going to pull it together. I'm quite happy with that just now. I'll dry this off. Right, the beak has got a little bit purple in it, and it's got this white highlight on top. So let's go back to the purple we just used for the feet. And we're just going to bring that right the way along the middle here. You can add a little bit white. And this little highlight right on top. Just concentrate as much as you can on that. Get it. And because we did our background already, the good thing is it's sort of done. It's just, you don't need to top up anything underneath it. there. Quite happy with that. We're going to go back to the eye. Hopefully this middle bit's a little bit drier now, and we're going to use a light brown. So just to lighten down the colour we've got, we're just going to tint it, which is adding a little bit of white in. Add a wee bit more brown there, until you get to a colour you like. You might need to keep adding a wee bit blue, brown and white until you're happy with where you're at. Might go a bit grey. And then I'm going to try and do as much detail as possible, just right the way around the sides. Like this. I think we need a wee bit darker right in the middle, don't we? And it's a bit blue. And last but not least, we're going to add in that white highlight. This is going to be satisfying to put in. It sits just at the corner here. There we go. Maybe a wee bit up top as well, like that. And I'm going to add in a little bit of highlight in the beak. And anywhere else you see any really bright highlight that you want to make stand out, pop that in as well. Okay, just a wee bit on the branch, so I'm going to use a slightly bigger brush. And we're going to use a little bit yellow and a little bit green. Now I'm getting towards the end of my painting, my palette's an absolute mess and I'm just mixing everything everywhere. I quite like a messy palette though. I think it makes you feel like you've done more painting. And for the branch, I'm just going to dab on lots of kind of the yellowy green on top. Just lots of wee dots. And then I'm going to grab a little bit brown, mix that in as well, and we're going to add lots of wee dots, kind of coming underneath as well. The thing with the branch is you can do it either way. You can have that as part of your main picture that you want to be as pristine as your bird, or you can make it a little bit more abstracted, probably is the word, where it is just lots of kind of colours coming together. The main thing you want is a highlight right the way, running right the way along the top. So you've got your, you can either do a light brown or you can do complete white. I'm going to do a light brown, and then you want to just have that happening right the way along the top, and it just gives you a highlight of the branch and makes it more 3D. Might have wee bits that are bigger than others as well, depending on the shape of the branch. Now as things dry, you might notice you need to add more in on different areas. Things do dry a little bit either darker or lighter depending. So you might have constant little fixes that you want to put in there. I've got one which is adding a wee bit more purple to this. Here. And I also want to just add more of a highlight down this side of my bird. And the thing about painting is you do want to be constantly trying to improve it. It's good to know when to stop, but you do want to continue to try and make things look better and better. So this little highlight down here is going to make it look more 3D. Making it stand out, I'm going to add a wee bit more of a highlight down this side as well. just the way he's lit, it's kind of almost on either side. And I'm going to put some more white back in here. So you always say we'll do the eye last, and then you start to think, oh, I need to balance this out a little bit. Just keep looking back at things you need to change throughout. And then I've lost my darkness here just by adding lots of layers. Sometimes you lose little bits throughout your painting, so I'm going to go back in with a dark blue and just get this as dark as I can. It was a wee bit watery. Let me try and brush a bit more. Just remixing a little bit because it's all sort of dried in a bit. The benefit of working with acrylics is it dries really fast, but also the downside of it is it dries really fast. Okay, now we've got that darkness down both sides, it's just looking a little bit more realistic. And I think I'll call it a day there with our bird. Please carry on adding little bits here and there. Sometimes you don't do things in one sitting as well and you want to keep adding to things. So it's always good coming back to another day just to see what you might want to add in there. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for joining me in painting our little birds. Over the next few weeks we'll be covering animals, landscapes, still life and lots of different techniques with your acrylics. So I hope you can join me then. See you later.